superstar. He is an absolute superstar, Tom Mitchell.
Cripps at the back. Cripps is too good.
Neil, yes! Oh, how good was that?
Welcome to the Ball Magnets podcast.
G'day guys, today's podcast is with Andrew Jack Russell. He's the high performance coach at the Carlton Footy Club. He's worked at Essendon, Port Adelaide and was a part of the three-peat through 13, 14 and 15 at Hawthorn. He's the best in his field, arguably the best in the world at what he does. Have a listen, I hope you get something out of it.
All right, so we've had Shaquille O'Neal, Josh Giddey, Seth Curry. I don't know if it gets any bigger than Andrew Jack Russell. Jack, thanks for coming on. You've obviously done the Dylan Friends podcast, but
yeah, I've been waiting for the phone to ring, mate.
Yeah, so Ball Magnets podcast has taken over Dylan Friends, so this is the one you really want to be on. So glad you've climbed that ladder. But mate, you've had an extensive career in S&C, so keen to explore everything around that to help our audience. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey from where you started, obviously professionally at Essendon Footy Club, and then your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I'm institutionalised in that I've only worked pretty much, in AFL footy ever since. I mean, I have coached a couple of Olympians along the way in track and field, but I actually ran the draft camp, in the late 90s. And how I got into footy was the fitness bloke at the time had broken his arm, and he said to Sheeds, who was the coach at the time at Essendon, I need to have someone to help me out. And I reckon I was just the first bloke that Sheed saw the next day. He happened to be at the draft camp. He asked someone, this is a fitness bloke. He'll do the job for you. Bang. Asked me if I want the job. I was living in Ballarat at the time. I was running about 120 Ks a week, being an athlete myself. I had about 5 jobs, didn't have a second to spare. And I said, I'd love to. That'd be great. When do I start, sort of thing. So I had to rearrange my life pretty quickly. Yeah. I was pretty young, so I was still working at the VIS. Unbelievable opportunity at the Institute of Sport back then. I was a real feeder for people in Australia back then, the Institute, AIS and all the state institutes. So I started at Essendon with Loris Bertolacci as my boss and the great Kevin Sheedy as the coach, and we went to work.
So Sheeds threw you a bone. So it was an element of luck to get to where you're at, because that was something I was keen to chat to you about today. There's obviously a lot of people who are aspiring to be athletes, but also a lot that are so interested in your field, S&C, and obviously you've done an enormous amount of work to get to the level where you are, the best in your field, in my opinion, and probably yours too. But there was an element of luck there to get the start initially.
Yeah, no question. I mean, luck plays a role in life. But what I would say is I dreamt of doing that role since I was a young boy. I lived being an athlete. I loved it. I was passionate. My whole life I'd go anywhere to learn off anyone I could. So I'm going through uni. I'm travelling all over Australia because I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. But I'd go anywhere. So someone saying there's an opportunity in Canberra, I'd drive to Canberra and say, well, who can I learn off there? I'd go to Queensland. I'd go anywhere.
So you're putting the odds in your favour. Even, we both know Clarko quite well. As a coach, that was always one of his big things, that with a game plan and certain things we do with an opposition, it might be something subtle, but you're putting the odds in your favour by putting yourself in front of people more often, being present, showing how eager you were, and in the end, that's probably helped as well.
Yeah, you put it out. There is an element you put it out to the world. You work really hard and something comes your way. I do believe in that very strongly. Clarko is fascinating because he was an assistant coach at Port Adelaide when I was there. So I went from Essendon. I was there for 3 years, and then I went to Port Adelaide. So I was unbelievably fortunate to get an opportunity to run the program at Port Adelaide when I was 24 years of age. Never met Clarko before. I'd been there a year. He comes in as assistant coach. Every time we travel somewhere, we'd go to an interstate game, we'd go to a training camp or something, he'd be on the phone the whole time trying to work out who the most high-profile person that he rated or the world rated around coaching, preparation, performance, and he'd just try and get in front of them.
Yeah.
He would just do anything to get in front, sit in front of them and say, what can I learn from this person? It was just like he was unbelievable. He just didn't miss an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that goes to show his drive. I guess to be the best in any field would be to have that drive and determination, and obviously you're going to get knocked back at certain times, but if you want something that badly, it seems as though Clarko was definitely that guy. But I assume with all the athletes you've worked with, where would you rank like pure drive in terms of attributes you want in your athletes? Obviously at Carlton now, running the high performance program, and there's so many different things that culminate in making the ultimate athlete. But how much is drive with anything you do? How does that
Well,
sit?
there's not one of them that I've worked with that isn't unbelievably driven, self-driven, and just makes the decision that they want to be good. Not because their dad wants them to, not because their mum, not because their best mate, not because the coach wants them to be. They are just passionate about being the best they can be. Now, some of them are born that way. Some of them read it in a book and they work it out. Some of them learn it off someone else, but they all have it. So I don't know where they got it from. I'd say a lot of them, I think it's just in them, but more so these days because there's so much information out there. There's so many podcasts people listen to. There's so many books out there that the smart ones just say, you know what, I've just got to drive this myself. I can't wait for anyone else to drive this. So the drive and the resilience, the ability to just keep bouncing back when shit doesn't go their way.
Yeah.
Because as an athlete, shit doesn't go your way more often than it does. It is hard work. If you want to be the best, you've got to be prepared for a whole lot of hardship. Simple as that.
Yeah, and you speak about resilience as well in terms of there's resilience as an athlete, but then there's resilience in life, but you intertwine the two, it's the same thing.
Oh, yeah, I really believe the way they live their life is the way that they play the game. The way you live your life comes out in your performance, whether that's on the footy field, the soccer field, the tennis court, the running track. Doesn't matter what it is.
It's interesting you
how
say
you
that.
play
I've
the
heard
piano.
Steve Kerr say that, the Golden State Warriors coach. He said exactly that. Yeah.
And I think you can still have athletes that perform well that don't have good life habits and don't do all that stuff well, but they could be a whole lot better, and they're certainly not consistent. They're not at a consistent high performance, and we often get mixed up between high-level athletes who have moments of brilliance versus high-level athletes who have consistent brilliance over a period of time, and they're the ones that match the talent with work rate, with passion, with drive, with all those things. So their talent gets you a certain way, and I mean, we even know that teams can be successful by doing things not particularly well. You can still get to the top with talent and a bit of luck, and things go your way, and just all of a sudden you get there, but you're not staying there long. Because you look at the teams that get there and then don't last very long at the top. Yeah, there's a pattern there. Something's happening.
Consistently is the challenging part, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we go back to your journey, so obviously starting at Essendon, it feels like everywhere you've been, success has followed you. I know you won't want me to pump you up too much, but I'll give you a bit of a pump up. So the Essendon Premiership in 2000, how was it being around a team that, is arguably, I know Bombers fans will say so, but one of the most talented teams, had the potential to win multiple premierships. I'm not sure why they didn't, but obviously the Lions may have had something to do with that in the following years with what they were able to do. But what did you witness from the senior players there, guys like Hurd and Matthew Lloyd and these types, and that group would have been your first real initiation to AFL footy and what the best teams look like?
Yeah, I was young, so I was thinking, how easy is this? Like, I was thinking, why can't everyone do this? What is it? And so at the time, I didn't really appreciate what they did that was so good. A lot of those guys have been through a fair bit of hardship since '93. They missed out on some big opportunities. They missed winning big games. They went down to the bottom of the ladder. So they had a resilience about them. And that's the thing that, when these teams become great, tell me a team that's become great without going through a genuine period of hardship. I'm not sure there's one. There may be, but I don't know. But no one tells the story. Everyone just tells the story of they win 1, they win 3, they win 4 out of 7. Aren't they amazing? They're this, they're that. But people rarely refer back to the journey and how hard individuals had to work and how hard that team had to work. They had a particular group of players there, the senior players. You talk about resilience and being tough. They were tough. I think they're probably the toughest group of men that I've worked with, like tough more than anything. I thought they were tough more than skillful. They had skill. They had some brilliant players, but I thought they were just really tough was their number one thing. They had the ball played in their half. I reckon 70% of the game, 80% of the game. So they didn't get challenged on defence a lot. Just in the contest, they were that good and just got the ball going in their half all the time. So it was actually really interesting, how efficient they were as well with the ball. But a lot of it was I think they had a good mix of speed, power, endurance, and that's what the good teams have as well.
Yep.
They have a really good blend.
Yeah. Yep.
And you need that blend of physiology
Complement each other.
that complement. You need
Yep.
a blend of different styles of players. You look at the Hawthorn teams. Extremely fortunate to be a part of. They had a very unique blend within that team that you only needed to have lost one or two of those guys, and all of a sudden it falls apart pretty quickly.
Yep.
And that's why good teams, when they lose a few players through injury or a few things that happen during the year, all of a sudden they get beaten. It's just like I wonder why they get beaten. It's hard to know exactly what it is that makes a team great, but when you take a few pieces out, you can see that it falls apart pretty quickly.
100%. And obviously, after the Essendon era, you were very young, as you mentioned, but at 24 years of age, you had a meeting, I believe, with Choco Williams and Phil Walsh, and at 24, you were running your own footy program. So I guess your dream as a kid, that sort of came to reality. And dealing with senior players at that age, like I know being a senior player now myself, like there'd be some big egos, some big personalities to deal with. They're probably thinking, who's this bloke coming in telling us what to do? So how did that initial meeting first occur with Choco and the Port coaching staff? And then how did you command the respect of the players to let them know that you were legit and that you could help them get to ultimately where they got to, winning a premiership in 2004?
There was a guy called Rob Snowden, who's the footy manager at Port Adelaide, who got in touch with me. I still to this day don't know how or why, or I've got no idea. He won't tell me. I went to a meeting with Choco, Phil Walsh. We were in Flemington. We sat down. For those who know, those two humans, extremely strong human beings, and both great human beings. Extremely passionate, and they started telling me how they thought how the footy world was and how you should condition a team, which I disagreed with. And I had a moment in that meeting, and they're sitting there, they're big men, a lot of, they're older than me and intimidating humans. And I'm thinking, right then, I've got a decision to make. Am I going to go along with this, or am I going to tell them what I really think? And as respectfully as I could, I said, I totally disagree. That's not how I see it at all. This is the way the game's going. This is what I saw at Essendon. This is how I think we should condition them. And if you continue down that path, I reckon you're going to fall behind what everyone else is, because eventually they're going to be doing it this way. Now, in hindsight, that's the thing that got me the job, because I had the ability to stand up to strong personalities, but do it in a respectful way. That could have gone the other way. Could have easily gone the other way.
Yeah.
And I owe a lot to Mark Williams and Phil Walsh, because they backed me in. Yep. So I'm not exactly sure what happened behind the scenes. I actually don't know how they managed the playing group. I don't know what happened. I never felt challenged by any player about my age. Not once did I feel intimidated. Did I feel like they didn't respect me? Now, I'm sure that was there. I'm sure it was in the background. It must have been.
But the empowerment from the coach to say this is
how
it is.
They led. Yeah. They said, this guy's in this position. He's been in an unbelievable environment in Essendon. He knows what he's talking about. I'm backing him in. You back him in. And we trained hard. I don't know, every team thinks they trained hard. But Phil said to me, we have a really skillful group of players here. We can play the game. Yeah. We're just not fit enough. Yeah. So I said, well, don't tell me that, and then just keep working on the skills and don't work on the conditioning. If you genuinely think that, let's work on it and really work on it. So we did 1.5 skill sessions a week. I got there in the off-seasons in the days where you did 3 months of training before Christmas.
Yep.
By Christmas, that team was probably the fittest I've ever seen any team in my time in 20 years, because we had 3 months of uninterrupted training with a ball component but not a heavy ball component. So every Monday morning we go to the running track and we do 15 150s on the running track every Monday morning. And then Monday night we do a light skill session. And then Tuesday morning we're in, and the midfielders would do an easy aerobic run. Tuesday afternoon we do strength. Wednesday morning we do a 2.5 hour conditioning session with no ball component. Thursday I was off. Friday we did a skill session in the morning, speed and power and strength in the afternoon. And Saturday we did a genuine running session, as in we're doing 15k plus in a training session. And then the guys who weren't in good condition would then get on the bike, and then we'd ride up into the Adelaide Hills, and I'd get home at 12 o'clock. I'd leave home at 6 a.m. I'd get home at 12 on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. Now, what also happened is blokes broke during that period of time. So I pushed them too hard.
Yep.
70% of the group was in A. The other thing we did during that time was Tuesday night, all the midfielders played a touch rugby competition in the local Adelaide touch rugby in the park. We'd go to the park.
Fill in.
Like the shittiest park, the shittiest grass. And I remember Roger James, Stuart Dew, Josh Franco, Josh Carr, these guys, and we just play against, average Joe Blow, down the street. We'd come and play touch rugby against them, and then they loved it.
Yeah.
But it was a really tough session. So we trained hard. 30% of them broke. I pushed them too hard, so I learned a lot about what limits and how much. But 70% were in unbelievable condition, and they were a running team. They were a running, skillful team. Port Adelaide, Brisbane were different, and Brisbane ended up winning at the end of the year because Port Adelaide finished on top 3 of the 4 years I was there. We finished on top of the ladder, yet we only won 1 because Brisbane were a very different team, and they were
strong.
They were tough.
Yeah, strong. Yeah.
Tough, hard, resilient. Like they were, they're a pretty special team.
Yeah.
Port were just a different. We probably played the way we trained.
Yeah.
A little bit. But then we did more footy as I went. We did more footy and a little bit less conditioning. So the year we won it, we did the least amount of conditioning that I was there. But we had 3 years of heavy going in. Yeah.
So that journey I find so interesting. Even when I speak to people like yourself, the journey of my old man played footy throughout the 80s and 90s, and how it was all about aerobic, long running, and then you speak about the difference in program from Essendon to Port Adelaide to what you do at Hawthorn, and how it's now. Now it's all about the footy performance rather than just being pure athletes. So how have you seen that journey? Because you mentioned there with Port, like you obviously learn a lot, but the guys were very fit, but it was a very holistic athlete fitness program rather than a footy program. So how do you think that journey's gone from, say, 2000 onwards, and where do you see it going from here onwards? Like, are we in a pretty good spot, or do you always find ways to evolve a program? You know what I mean? With how much change of direction, how much skill you do, how much pure running and conditioning you do?
Yeah. But people say, the game's changed, and it has. My conditioning philosophies haven't changed at all.
What are they?
They've moulded, they've changed, that's difficult to put in words, isn't it? Like, it's actually really difficult.
I'm just trying to.
It's actually really difficult because what it is, the beauty of AFL footy and any team sport like AFL footy is you're training a sprint athlete 1 minute and you're training a marathon runner the next. Like, you've got to have elements of marathon training in there, and that's a bit extreme. But then you've got elements of a guy where you're trying to improve 20-metre acceleration.
And that's why you think it's the toughest sport in the world?
Without doubt. I mean, what you're trying to do and the levers you're trying to pull is crazy. So in the end, what it ends up becoming is quite an individualised approach in that, this guy here, he's got good speed. Well, if he's got good speed but his endurance is poor, let's not try and make, the athlete be able to run 9.7 for 100. Let's just be happy you can run 10.1. And if you can maintain running 10.1 for 100, as an example, let's improve his 5K time, so we have a better overall athlete. But, some guys need to be more dynamic. Some guys need to be more aerobic. Some guys are very, very good athletically, but their decision-making is not as good, so get them, focus on the ball program of them. So it's probably just that individualisation, the analytics behind knowing what we know now, using GPS and using technology has improved how we do it. So now we know what we're getting from the training. We know what the game output is, whereas we were guessing what we thought it was. Yeah. So the people who guessed well did a pretty good job. Yeah. Whereas now it's a bit more level playing field because everyone's got the same information. Yeah. So I think it's actually leveled it up a little bit. But you know what I mean? The neuropsych is probably the area that's changed the most. 20 years ago, there was a bit of science, there's a bit of research there. Now there's a heap of research out, and that body and mind connection. The people that can get that piece and really tap into that are the ones that are, taking their athletes to another level.
Can you talk a bit more about the neuroscience? Because I actually don't know a lot about this either. So just a bit more detail around that. So what does that actually look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way you think changes the types of neurons and how you develop those neurons in your brain.
So it's not all purely physical. Then it's how you're wired, and
it's how you're wired, and you can rewire your brain due to the way that you think. So, people that are wired a certain way as kids, they're an advantage. Because the way they were brought up, the way they were parented, the environment they were in, they talk now about, kids growing up, they have moderate levels of stress in their life with a lot of support around them. So, and you think about this, all different combinations of that. There's kids that have got no stress in their life. They get protected all the time, all right? And people think, that's great, that's the way to go. Well, stress is a good thing. Stress is how we adapt as human beings. We need stress in our lives, and stress has been put out as this bad thing. Stress, we don't want to go near it. It's no good for us at any level. Well, stress is great, but stress is also how you perceive it. So same event happens in your life to my life. I perceive that completely differently to you. And so I have a big stress response. You don't have the same stress response. So we say all the time, how does a player deal with a game outcome?
That's the resilience.
That's the resilience
you
piece.
talk about,
so
yeah.
You don't play well. The coach criticises you. Dad criticises you. Mum criticises you. The guys in the AFL then have the layer of the media criticising you.
Yeah.
Well, how do you view that criticism?
Yeah. No, it's so true. You see it with, obviously, you'd see it with your players as well. There's degrees of how players can cope with that. And like you said, the ones that can bounce and not brush it, because if there's something in the messaging that you can improve on, you take it and you work on it. But it's almost having the ability to, like you said, every player, every person is going to be criticised at some point. It's how can you just roll with the punches and keep going almost, because I think they're the guys, like you said, that tend to be the consistent performers week after week, season after season, because they're not getting down in the dumps about it. They're able to just move on and, all right, what's next? It's all just a part of it.
Well, Cripper's a great example right now.
Yeah.
Last year, the world writes him off.
Yeah.
Says his body's no good. He's not playing with enough power. He's this, he's that. He's lost it. He's got a long contract. What's going on? He'll never get back to his best. Now, then he has a very consistent year of high-level football, and no one talks about that anymore. No one says, geez, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why he didn't play so well the year before is actually, you talk about the mind, is due to cognitive fatigue.
Yeah.
Your captain, your club's not going well, you're not going quite as well as you want to, there's layers, the media, and all of a sudden you have this layer of cognitive fatigue that just weighs you down. And therefore your energy is the result. You lose energy, you lose power. People say you're injured all the time.
It's rather, you mentioned as well, rather than purely looking at a body part and saying, oh, he must be hurt, there is that energy sap, or whatever you want to call it, that mental fatigue that can add elements as well. And that can come from normal stress in your life, but also in Cribber's instance, the pressure of almost feeling as though he had to carry a footy club.
Absolutely. So he goes away, he rejuvenates. One of the best ways you can rejuvenate as a human being is to break away from your normal environment and go to a new environment. So, you've been away, you've been everywhere, you've travelled halfway around the world and back. Yeah. You should be feeling amazing.
I'm feeling pretty good.
You should be feeling amazing. So, you get away.
Invite me down to Mount Eliza.
Well, mate, it's there. Whenever you want, you can come down.
I'll be coming down.
So you can't, you go away, you went away, comes back, trains hard, he's consistent. He had a few issues in pre-season. Everyone knows about. He didn't kick the footy until January. For instance, because he had an issue. But we adapted around it. He just said, let's get on with it. We'll change things. We'll do something else. We couldn't do that, so we worked on another piece of the puzzle, and then we came back to the full program when he was ready. But he was enjoying himself, and he prepared, and he had a really very challenging off-season where he came back in the best shape he's ever been in. So he wasn't using the pre-season to get in good shape, as in November to March.
To get better.
He was moving to get better. He was moving to train specifics of his game.
Yeah.
But physically came back in the best shape he's ever been in to start it. All right.
I remember catching up with him and thinking exactly the same thing. I'm like, he looks in really, really good nick. And it's a great point you mentioned. And even, I've been fortunate enough to go to America, and I love learning from the athletes over there in the NBA. And you can even see the best players there, exactly what you just said, the off-season, although you want to get away and rejuvenate, but it's, you don't want to go backwards. It's the cycle of, I guess, a sporting career is that, sure, you're not actually playing during a period of time, but it's a never go, the journey is still going, you want to be in a position so that over the pre-season you can work on your game so that it comes out in the game, and then you go to the next off-season, but you don't want to, it's not like a big, peaks and troughs, is it? It's an ongoing journey. You don't just stop for a period of time and then start again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you need to live it.
Yeah.
You need to live it. And one of the challenges we have the game right now is the AFL Players Association say you can't have access to all these players for a certain period of time. Well, that's not helping the players to get better. You got a whole series of players that go away. Some of them, so you have a series of players that manage it particularly well. All right, they're very self. They know exactly what to do. You have all these younger players have no idea what to do with the time that they're given because they've just come out of school, and you got everything in between. It's just like, why wouldn't you have the clubs manage their own players? They know them. They know what they need. Every year it might change. 1 year you might give your players 3 months off. The next year you might give them 3 weeks off, and you go 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. But the experts and the people that know those people, they're the ones that manage them, and that's high performance. We're still not there in the AFL if we're treating it like this big long block. You don't have access to your players and your people. It's in the dark ages.
I think that's the difference in probably what you would notice. I assume the top players you've worked with in your time would be open to whatever they need to do to be the best they can be. They'll do it. But then there's, I guess, other players who it may not mean as much to them, and so the time off, high performance isn't everything to them because they want to do other things with their life. So it is, I guess, a very individual basis. But I think in terms of the possibilities of how well footy can be played, like it could potentially reach new heights if you had that access and ability to have that 24/7.
Well, it'd be fascinating to see how teams do it.
Yeah.
Like, how would they do it?
I don't know.
Like, part of the puzzle, a 12-month puzzle, is how you manage your playing group. And this is another part of the 12-month puzzle. So players still get the time that they deserve to get. They still get their time away. It's not about taking a time away. It's about how you manage that time and how you break the time up. And that could be pretty cool for players in the AFL if we looked a little bit broader.
Yeah, let's be open to it. Keen to ask you, Jack, about some of the best players you've worked with in your time. You've obviously been a part of premiership teams at Essendon, Port Adelaide, Hawthorn through their golden era. Obviously at Carlton now, I'm sure that's what you're aspiring to do. But just want to throw a few names at you and just get a little bit about them as a person, maybe a story that sticks out to you and what made them so good. So I'll start with Buddy Franklin, good mate of mine, and obviously you worked very close with him in his absolute prime.
Yeah, the big Bud, he was on another level. He was on another level physically to any player I've worked with in the game. He had all of it, especially those years, the early years. He had all of it when he was a bit lighter. He was 100 kilos in 2008. He came in at 89 kilos. 4 years before that, he was really, like, for his height, he was really light. He couldn't do one chin up. So the first day walked in, we're doing all this testing, not one chin up.
Couldn't do a chin up.
Could he do?
Could he run then?
No, he could run.
Yeah, he could run.
He could run. He was quick. He was powerful. He had a huge reach. So when you're doing like handball games, no one could touch him. You just couldn't get near him. He'd be brushing blokes aside. He was just powerful and strong. His endurance was, in the top 3 as well, and everything else was just about the best there. One day, we were training in Coffs Harbour, and we were doing 150-metre reps in 2007, and you had Crawford was going well at that stage. Timmy Clark was, obviously a really good runner at Hawthorn, and they did 21 150s. And Clarkie and Crawford were really good runners, and they couldn't go with him the whole way. So they were basically, you'd have one crack at him, and the next one would come in, have a crack at him, then one have a rest, and they're just coming at him. He did 21 150s under 20 seconds, which is pretty cool, off a minute rest. So anyone who knows athletics for a footballer, that is, that's next level on a shitty grass track, out the back of Coffs Harbour where the Australian Rugby Union used to have their set up there. So, yeah, he was, he was good. He got a bit heavier. He got heavier when he was at Essendon, and then he got heavier late in his career. Obviously, his aerobic stuff dropped, as he got heavier. I mean, as any athlete gets heavier, you can't run as well. It's as simple as that. You want to improve your VO2 max. Well, the best way to improve your VO2 max and your ability to use oxygen is just drop body weight.
Yeah,
you will become a more efficient runner if you drop body weight. Now, AFL, we don't want to be dropping body weight, but there's a myth, where every player's got their optimal level.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks more is better, heavier is better. There are some players we try and strip their weight right off.
I'm one of those. I think Cripper's one of those as well. I play my best footy when I'm light and covering the ground, whereas other guys, like you said, they might need to be competent enough in the contest and have a bit of weight. So it comes back to that individual program for what each guy needs.
Well, Sean Burgoyne, we took weight off Sean Burgoyne based on his knee, but it was the best thing to happen for his footy as well. So he was 93 kilos. We took him down to 89 kilos, and then we just stayed there. We didn't flirt with it. We didn't look for more. It was just, that's what it is. That was his optimal level. Yeah. That's what his knee enjoyed. That's what his body enjoyed. And then we just stuck with it. Cripper, we now know exactly what his weight. We played around with getting heavier and more powerful and stronger. And he got powerful and strong. but then he couldn't cover the ground as well.
Yep.
So you
Yeah,
lose
it's fine
athleticism.
balance.
So, it is a fine balance. One of the best guys I worked with is a guy called Michael Wilson.
Yep. Port Adelaide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute beast of a human being. Talk about resilience. And I can't exactly, but something like 3 knee reconstructions, 2 shoulder reconstructions, 3 ankle reconstructions, like, Achilles rupture, like crazy. And I actually, in 2004 when we won it, he had a bad shoulder that he had reconstructed at the end of the year. He could not drive to training for 3 days. For the 3 days after every game, from about round 15 onwards, is my recollection, his wife had to drive him to training for the first 3 days because he couldn't use his shoulder, couldn't use his arm. Then he'd slowly get his function back towards the end of the week where he could actually literally run, and then we'd throw him out there and he'd just survive. Unbelievable, through toughness, and then he just back up next week, same thing, couldn't drive for 3 days. Then by the end of the week it was just good enough to play, and he was so highly regarded at Port Adelaide. Outside, wasn't regarded as one of the best players outside of Port Adelaide. He wasn't your Warren Treadray, and wasn't talked about as your Josh Franco or your Stewie Dew, but he was regarded internally as one of the most important players to winning that premiership, just because how resilient he was. How
He
tough
played in the
was.
flag, did he? Played in it? Yeah. Yeah, it's a good effort.
But I mean,
Super
since
effort.
then, I've been lucky. I've had some amazing,
Yeah.
people, including your good self, mate, coming from Sydney.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a great story about you, and
Right.
this is a good story.
PJ?
What's that?
PJ?
No, this is actually, it's a conditioning story. I've got some PG,
All right,
some
let's
non-PG
go.
stories, but this is a PG one.
Hit me with the PJ.
And there's some stuff in this for everyone, because you came to the footy club with a patella tendon injury.
Yeah, I was battered up. I remember being battered. I remember seeing you guys for the first time and just come off the grand final from Sydney and was a bit battered up. I think I had some groin stuff as well.
You had some groin stuff, and we went and did a walk in New Zealand, so up and down mountains. So,
That's right.
we did a big walk one day. It was about 12 hours.
Yeah.
And 9 hours into that walk, we had a descent that was about 25-degree angle descent for about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Well, I remember we were meant to go down a track, but they blocked it off, so we had to go purely down a mountain hill.
So we had these guys running that were absolute cowboys, running it. But it made for an unbelievable trip once we got through it. But getting through it was the problem. Your patella tendon failed, I reckon, an hour going down that hill where you couldn't walk. And I remember you rolling down the hill for the next 2 hours. I had Clarko coming at me. I had Andrew Lambert, the head physio, coming at me just saying, "You're a fucking idiot. Why'd you get him to do this? You made the worst mistake. What did you do?" Anyway, you were in all sorts after that, your patella tendon. It took you 2 weeks to recover from it. And then you didn't have a patella tendon issue for the whole year.
Is that right?
In your Brownlow year.
Did it fix me?
Well, it's funny, sometimes we're really conservative in the way that we treat athletes.
Yep.
And sometimes we're too conservative in the way we treat athletes. My theory is, and our theory, talking to Andrew Lambert about this, is we put so much stress through that patella tendon, so much eccentric load through that patella tendon, but then we allowed that tendon to recover. So you took 2 weeks to be able to run again.
Yeah.
And then you took another week or 2 to get back from that, to get back to good function. It was Christmas, so that saved us. But your tendon adapted, and then we didn't have an issue the whole year with your patella tendon.
I didn't even remember it until you told me that. I remember rolling down the hill. That was good fun because there was also, because Jager obviously had a bad knee, there was a few guys, and remember they had a helicopter at some point, and they picked up a few blokes, and then a few they didn't.
Yeah, it was
like
an amazing trip. We just called them up. There was the farmer next door. We just called them up. Chopper would come in.
Yeah.
They would hover a metre above the ground. Blokes that were injured,
Jump in,
just
it's like an
throw
army
them
camp.
in, army camp, and then go back down. Yeah, I wasn't feeling very good at the end of that camp. Let me tell
it
you.
was a good challenge though. It was good fun. That was a bloody good camp, that one. I'm going to throw a few more names at you. Cyril Rioli.
Cyril was a real challenge for us and a challenge for me, because when he was at the footy club, he was so professional and he loved training. When he was away from the football club, didn't train so hard. So he'd come back, and then we'd often have to get him back to a good level. But he was a real joy to work with, because he was really passionate about the game. He loved the boys.
He was
at
so
the footy
bubbly to
club.
be around, wasn't he? He was just a good
He
teammate
was
as well.
great.
Yeah.
Now, I think the game challenged him at other levels. Like, I don't think he enjoyed being a celebrity. I don't think he enjoyed the attention at all. He just wanted to turn up to a football club and play footy. And he enjoyed game day, putting on his show in front of big crowds. But I don't think he enjoyed the other parts at all. As much as any player I've worked with, he didn't enjoy that parts of it. He just wanted to hide in the footy club and be one of the boys. Yeah. So no, and we had some challenges with his body. He tested us. Now that was just, he didn't test us, but the fact he kept breaking down tested us. Yeah. And I remember he played the grand final, which it's a fascinating story. We should never have played him. We did. We got away with it, and we all think we're great. But
would he have played again the following week? Say if that was a prelim you got him up for, would he have played? Did he hurt his hammy in the final, in that grand final?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He didn't hurt the. We took him off with 15 minutes to go, based on we've got away with this. Let's not rip it to shreds. Yeah. But the story basically is that he had a significantly torn tendon, and he re-tore it in training, his hammy tendon. And then we basically trained him to be able to play the game. We said he needs to play one game for the grand final. So he played the VFL grand final on prelim final weekend. Yep. And he played just over a half. And he wasn't particularly impressive. Like, he didn't play great because he was only in second gear. And I remember Clarko was saying to me, what do you think? Has he played enough? I said, well, yeah, he might have played enough time, but you're going to play that? Like, he hasn't produced anywhere near what you need him to produce. He's only run 5 metres a second. Yeah. Like, he's got to be able to run 7.5 metres a second. He said, all right, go down and tell him that he needs to lift his intensity. Let's look for 15 minutes. So I went down half-time of the VFL Grand Final. I said, Cyril, we want to play you next week, but we can't play you on the way that you played. You've got to produce a bit more intensity than that, but we don't want you to sprint either. So what we did is we trained him basically saying, well, what the highest chance of him ripping that hammy is him sprinting, because we knew that he can go above 9 metres a second. So we trained him to run 7.5 metres a second. And we basically said, within the bubble, within 5 metres, you can accelerate and go hard, all right, and tackle. Outside of the bubble, do not chase. Do not chase hard.
In tight, short,
sharp, bang,
tackle,
bang, bang, go like that.
Hands,
but do not break out. Do not jump in the air, and do not break out. So we practiced running at the speeds that we thought he could get away with. So we practiced running at 6, 7, 7.5 metres a second. So his body got used to what that was. In the grand final, he ran 7.5 metres a second was his top speed.
Is that right?
No, that's not quick. No one picked it up. No one said he wasn't running fast. No one picked up that.
Is that because he is so agile? Like, he still looks quick when you're agile?
Still, because his feet are so quick.
Yeah.
So, but when I knew that I thought he was going to be right was the first contest, because he hadn't left the ground once in his training, and in that half in the VFL the week before he played the grand final. The first contest, ball goes inside 50, he tries to take a screamer. All right, first contest.
Yeah.
I looked at Andrew Lambert and Michael McDeesey, Doc. I said, "Oh my God, what was he doing?" Anyway, he bounced out and ran around, and then during the game, I actually forgot about it, because you just get into the game. I forgot about it, and then last quarter, I said, "Clark, can we get him off, mate? Like, just we're winning by a lot." I said, "Let's get him off, because he really shouldn't have. He wasn't well conditioned. He wasn't conditioned enough to play." But we were smart in the way that we managed him, and it's one of the great stories in terms of he executed exactly what we trained him to execute. But there was also a bit of luck in there. And then I said to Clarko after that, I said to him, he said, tell me about pre-season. I said, well, Cyril won't be back in the program until February. He goes, what do you mean? He just played in a grand final. I said, well, he's so deconditioned that we need to go back, start again. Yeah. So you won't see him until January doing anything to do with footy. We basically need 3 months to recondition that muscle and that tendon, and then you'll get and then he had a great year and ended up winning Norm Smith the next year, based off his preparation. Completely
pretty fascinating, isn't it? It's unbelievable. And that obviously goes to the credit of how important a medical team and people that know what they're doing in your position to be able to get him through. I remember there's vision of him coming to the bench. I think he's in tears as well, because he probably couldn't even believe that he did it as well. He would have had so much self-doubt, I assume.
Well, no, he had a huge amount of self-doubt. And it was a big part of it was Clarko basically challenged us and said, all right, well, I'm prepared to take a 70% Cyril, which is pretty rare because most players can't play at the level unless you're sort of at 90%. Most guys don't get away with it. It's too hard. Yeah. So that showed his level of talent that he could get away with it, and that's very rare in the game. So he basically said, you guys work it out. I want 70% Cyril. You blokes work it out. It's just like, no, mate, it's not going to happen. So we had that many discussions around, no, mate, you can't do it. He's not playing. He just wouldn't. He'd just go, right, tell me how you can make it happen.
He just wouldn't let it up.
And it was that shared decision making that if it didn't work, guess what? I, the coach, am a big part of this decision. You're part. We're all part of it. We all take it. So if it goes well, we all take it and we walk away and feel good about it. And if it doesn't go well, we're all in it together.
Yep.
No finger pointing.
Yeah, I love that collaborative approach. While we're on the Hawthorn era, may as well throw one more at you. So I'll throw in Hodgie. Obviously, I think he's the best leader I've come across in foot. I only spent a year with Hodgie, but just the amount of respect he has from the playing group. Such a good guy as well, the way he can build relationships, but ultimate competitor. Like, you can see when he gets that fire in his eyes, you're like, oh shit, stirred up Hodgie here. Like, he's ultimate competitor, but there's some of the obvious ones around him. What do you think made him such a special leader, but also player, to be able to lead Hawthorn through, that era?
Well, Hodgie learnt a lot of tough lessons early. He was a natural leader on the field, but he needed to learn, the stuff off field to match it, to become, which is why he wasn't captain to start with. So he had to work on his lifestyle. He really did. Like, we've had this love-hate relationship, me and Hodgie, for years, because I just did not back down about what was required to be the best. It's like, well, you tell me you want to be the best, but you're not showing me through your actions. You are on the way you train. Like, he trained hard. He trained with intent. He trained with intensity. But what he was doing away from the club meant that he wasn't that impressive, what he was producing on the training track. So when he got that bit right, when he actually worked out that, you know what, the way you live your life is the way you play, all of a sudden he became a better leader, because he could actually genuinely challenge people. But before that, he couldn't challenge anyone, and he had a few guys that were probably leading him down the wrong path within the footy club. And part of the journey for Hodgie was we got rid of some of those people, and some hard calls were made on some big names to help Luke Hodge be the player that he could be, of which he acknowledges. He was part of that journey, saying, mate, this is why we're doing this. I remember Shane Crawford came to me one day and he said to me, I'm telling you, Jack, he won't be playing the game in 2 years if you keep going that hard at him. And I said, well, maybe that might be the case, but he's going to be nowhere near as good as he should be if he continues to live the way he's living. So I'm going to keep doing it, because I reckon he's tough. I reckon he's resilient. I reckon he can handle it. And I don't reckon many others could. Yeah. But it just took a punt.
Love to be a fly on the wall with some of those chats.
Well, they were real. They were real. Yeah. And he would challenge us. Like, it was on at times. But out of that builds a huge amount of respect. And that's why some of those years are so enjoyable, because everyone looks at the end outcome saying how easy was that. There is nothing easy. It was just hard the whole time behind the scenes. Yeah. The whole time was challenging, because you just had to be on your game, just managing people, everyone managing everyone else. We're all managing each other.
Yeah, 100%. That's well said. It's always so much work that goes into these things, and there's always a perception from the outside. But, you can even talk about an individual career in that regard as well. Like, people see the finished product on game day, but there's always so much work and people that go in behind the scenes to help players get to that level. Like, you wouldn't even realise how much work, which is why I guess I want to ask you this one last question before we let you go. Thank you so much for your time as well. We've got a pretty large audience of kids, coaches, athletes aspiring to be the best. Athletes just want to just play and have a good time with their mates. So it's a vast difference. But I guess for the young athletes that do aspire to be the best they can be and potentially reach the highest level, what would be your advice to a young athlete, say, let's just say around 15 years old, when you think you know everything, but you know nothing? I know I was like that, because even now as a 29-year-old, like, I'm still learning. I'm sure you're still learning as an old-timer as well. Like, the journey never ends. But what would be something that I guess is simple for someone at that age to understand and implement?
Well, I think firstly you need to get some people around you that you trust. So you need to work out who you can listen to, because a lot of people will get in your head and try and direct you. So you need to be respectful of everyone, but you need to work out who are the 2, 3, 4 people that really matter. Because if you listen to too many voices, you're just going to end up getting lost. You need to be consistent. You just got to turn up. You just got to say, I don't feel very good today. You don't need to be at your best every day, but you need to just say, well, what's the best version of me today? because there are going to be days where you're tired, you're sore, especially young athletes where you're adapting to new load.
Yep.
It's just like, is this normal? Should I feel this sore? Well, you need to understand and work on what is soreness that you can train through and what is soreness that is injury.
Yep.
And that I can't tell you how to do that.
I think that's sort of test and learn a little bit yourself, isn't it? Sometimes you don't even know, but you learn what your body likes and doesn't like.
And it's okay to fail. So it's okay to push it too far and get injured. And that's all right, because next time you say, all right, when I was in that situation, I probably went a bit too hard. But that consistency over brilliance, try and do 3 or 4 good sessions a week as opposed to one outstanding session where you absolutely smash yourself, but then you can't train for 4 or 5 days. You want to work on the way that you view the world. You want to work on the way that you view challenging situations. It's normal. You're not any different to anyone else. We all experience pain. We all experience discomfort. We all have challenges. And so your ability to deal with that is really important. So if you don't deal with it well, try and get someone to help change and work with you, because you can at that age. You're really malleable, that you can change at that age if you want to. You need to have a good balanced program. So if you've fair income about it, as in good strength program, you can be doing some really good quality strength training at that age. Not heavy, but there's a balance, stability, strength, Pilates program. I mean, one of the things, if I was any 14, 15-year-old, I'd be getting them to do a Pilates type
Definitely.
program, muscular endurance type program. I think it's the absolute fundamental. Even before doing strength training, I'd be going down that path, and I always advise the young athletes to be doing that type of training. Get an environment where that's possible, stretching, understand what a good diet is and what it isn't, because we think we know, but often a lot of us don't know, and there's a lot of advice out there that's wrong. So work on what is a genuinely good diet and what isn't. What are the sort of the fundamentals? Because a lot of us eat really, really well for 80% of the day, and it's the 20% where we lose it, and it's the 20% that is 80% of the problem.
Yeah.
So everyone, I talk to a lot of people say, no, I eat really, really well. 3 meals a day, and I eat this and that, and it's just like, well, that looks great, but they leave out the chocolate bar, they leave out the packet of chips after after school, they leave out the fact that they miss breakfast, they leave out some fundamentals there. It's just like, well, that's the problem. You're actually doing a lot right to understand that those little things can all make a big difference. So explore. Explore. There's a lot of stuff out there right now, isn't there? Heaps of great podcasts, heaps of great books. But that consistency and just learning about yourself, learning about how far you can push, and
I think
where your limits are.
You'd rather, like you said before, around training too far and getting injured. I think I don't know if it's right, but I've always been like that, to overshoot slightly until you've learned where your threshold is, because ultimately then you don't really know how far you can go or what your potential is. But I think once you've realised where that threshold is of overtraining, that you need to be smart and not let your body break down and don't make the same mistake again. So I think it's like you said, it's okay to make this mistake once, but once you've made it, it's like, okay, that's what I did last time, that was too much, and I'm actually doing myself a disservice if I go over the hump again. So.
We're capable of a lot more than we think we are, but we have to gradually get to that level. So if you've never been for a 20-minute run before, don't do a 20-minute run.
Yeah. Start at 5, start at 10.
Start at 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then go 2 lots of 5 minutes, 3 lots of 5 minutes, 4 lots of 5 minutes, 5 lots of 5 minutes, go to 25 minutes of broken running, and then go to 25 minutes. So you might take 6 weeks to get to a 25-minute run, and don't think that 5 minutes is weak. That's just smart.
Yep.
But you'll adapt and you'll get there, and the body adapts unbelievably quickly if you allow it to.
It's like a knee tendonitis going down a hill in New Zealand. That's how it adapts.
Well, that was dumb. But we got away with it. But I learned something. I learned that you can push it more than you think you can.
Yeah, no, I like the approach, Jack. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today. I'm sure the listeners out there will get plenty out of that. One of the S&C gurus, not only the AFL, but in world sports. So as always, thank you to our sponsors, AIA Vitality and Iron Edge, for making the podcast possible. And thanks again, Jack. I'll see you at the G. Hopefully one of the early rounds, 90,000.
Pies, mate. Black and white.
I know how good.
It's going to be difficult to watch.
Yeah, it'll be weird, won't it? I'll be running to the bench. Yelling some abuse at you.
Good luck, mate. Good luck. Hope it goes well.
Thanks, Jack.